How does diversity drive progress and creativity in marketing agencies? And why will agencies who don't address the call to action on diversity and inclusion get left behind? In this Small But Mighty Agency episode, I connect with Mooren Bofill, partner of 123 West, an award-winning agency, to explore the topic of diversity and inclusion and what Mooren is doing to champion initiatives that are not just band-aid approaches. We also get to talking about what it was like to work in agencies as a young woman of Asian ethnicity. Yes, that was like 15 years ago. We both speak candidly about our upbringings, struggling to find our voice and learning to see our ethnicity as the superpower. Stay tuned to explore building a better agency by rethinking the impact of diversity and inclusion in your business. Welcome to the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. If you're a creative consultant or agency owner who wants to know what the roller coaster ride really looks like to grow your business from one to many, you're in the right place. My guest and I pull back the curtains on the realities of growing and running agencies of different sizes and what it takes to build a team. And if you're anything like me, you want more than the highlight reel. You want to learn from the mistakes of others so that you can stop short of making the same mistakes. I'm your host, Audrey Joy Kwan. I spend my days as a coach and consultant to multiple 6- and 7-figure agency owners. For the last 7 years, I've been behind the scenes helping people grow, lead, and operate small but mighty agencies. Here at the Small But Mighty Agency podcast, we'll uncover what works and, equally as important, what didn't work to get these business owners to where they are today. Hi, Mo. I am so thrilled to have you here to talk about diversity and inclusion in agencies. So before we begin, tell us about your agency and what you do at your agency.
For sure. Hi, Audrey. It's so nice to meet you. I'm really pumped to be here. And this is very much a topic that's, as you know, is very near and dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. So I'm Mo Bofill. I'm currently one of the partners and creative director of design at 123 West. We are a creative and design agency based out of Vancouver and Toronto. So a big part of my role, I'm quite new here. I'm about, I think, 8 months in. So time flies when you're having fun. But one of the things that we're doing as an agency is obviously expanding our offering nationwide. So across Canada. So I'm super pumped to start and help start our Toronto offering.
Amazing. Expansion always means adding more people, which lends well to this conversation about building diversity and inclusion in teams. Yeah. So can you share your views on diversity and inclusion and why it's essential to business success?
A successful business means happy people within it, right? Mm-hmm. People who feel like they belong, they are empowered, people who feel like they are part of something that they are proud of and can be a part of. For me, that's what a successful business is. I think table stakes is, making sure you make great profit. Otherwise, you're not a business, right?
Absolutely.
So that's table stakes for me. And, the products and services that you deliver should also be at a level in which is really great. But again, that's table stakes as well. It's really how you treat people and the people within it, I think, is what determines if a business is successful or not, right? Are you retaining talent? Mm-hmm. Are you recruiting the right talent? And are you, do people want to work there? And I think for me, that's a testament to a successful business and why diversity and inclusion is so important to that, because we need to access different types of thinkers, different types of people that come from different perspectives. So when we say diverse and inclusive, it means not only understanding that people come from different backgrounds and cultures, but, different mentalities, upbringings, ethnic backgrounds, but, obviously gender sensibilities, religious backgrounds. It's truly capturing diversity in its whole totality. And I think if we are in the business of creativity and originality, you need to create a team that captures the perspectives of the world to be able to produce something original, right? Like if you hire the same type of talent all the time, you're going to come back with the same thing.
As a person of ethnicity, what has been your experience in agency life?
Well, I will say, so I've been in the industry for about 10 plus 15 years, around there. Around 15 years. I would say for about the first 3 years, I was in agencies where I was the only female in the creative team, and I was the only minority and female who's also a person of color. So definitely the beginning part of my career, there was not a lot of representation. And then I would say, in terms of as I grew my career and got into leadership roles, I saw less and less so representation within it. So, for example, I think right now the old stat is that 3% of women are in leadership roles in advertising. I think through the See It, Be It movement, they've quoted that we're now up to 11, which is amazing. It's great. We're making some great headway. And I would say even in Canada, we are more diverse and representative when it comes to females and also people of color in leadership roles, but we're not close to where we need to be. So I say my experience has always been, I never felt that me being female or color was a detriment to my success, but I also didn't see it as an advantage till later on in my career. So for me, what I struggled with, I would say, was more so as a younger creative. I didn't see any leaders that looked like me in leadership roles earlier on. You know, I had Helen Pack and Judy John, who are females that I admire, both of Asian backgrounds, but they were few and far between. So not being able to see that representation in leadership roles definitely wasn't as encouraging as if it was more available to me. You know, if you can see it, be it. And then I would say, and when I was as a leader, I definitely struggled with my own leadership style. And I had a lot of insecurities around, one, I was most often the only female in a room of CEOs. So when I was, don't get me wrong, I think I was in a leadership role quite young. So I had a few things in my own perception back then against me. I was a young leader. I also looked young. I was female and a woman of color. So typically when I'm at pitch meetings or when I'm going to dinners or when I'm talking new business, it's typically, you know, CEOs in their late 40s, early 50s, typically white male. So how do you now be seen and heard and taken seriously at the table? And for me, a lot of my insecurities definitely came into play when I'm like, no one at the table looks like me. I feel like I am the smallest person in the room. How do I now find my voice? And for me, I struggled earlier in my leadership role in terms of how do I now have a voice at this table?
Yeah, I really resonate with that. I think back to my 20s, and I also worked for agencies in my earlier years. And I remember being female, yes, and Asian. And I think, I also looked very young in my 20s. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Leadership often were white guys. They were white guys, you know, who were the CEOs and the VPs. And I think for me, what was interesting is that I oftentimes felt that rather than being able to bring who I was into the conversation, that because of what I saw in the room, that I had to conform.
Yeah.
Like that to me, like that was the big takeaway that I had when I look back on my 20s and being in an agency that really didn't have too much diversity and inclusion, especially at the leadership level.
Yeah, 100%. And I totally agree. And to your point, you know, early in my leadership career, what I needed to do, one, to your point, emulate the strong men in front of me. Like how can I be, you know, as smart as them, as charismatic? And at the same token, I also looked at women in leadership roles then. And you know, a lot of the women that I came across were very, you know, steadfast, resolute, and very, I would say, almost they were perceived as the boss bitch, if you were part of my French. Yeah. That was the term back then, right? That was the term. Like if you were a female in a leadership role, you needed to be a boss bitch. So there was a moment in time where, so typically my leadership style is very much leading from beside or behind. Definitely softer in nature. Definitely, I don't have a lot of hard edges to the way I lead. So there was a moment early in my leadership career where I thought that for me to be seen and heard is for me to be a bit more, you know, vocal, aggressive, all the things that I thought a leader was in order to be seen and heard. And I did it for, I think, half a year. Then I was just like, this isn't you. Like it didn't feel natural. Like I felt like, I'm like, do I need to be rude? Do I need, not rude per se, but do I need to be strong and, unfaltering and not as, I became like not as collaborative as I hoped I would be. And I didn't get the best results out of that. So I definitely just recalibrated and realized, you know what, like I just need to lean into the three things that I am. I am woman. I am female. I had a perspective of somebody who was younger than most. Therefore I was, sometimes more in touch with the audiences that we needed to reach. So I had that going for me. And I also had I was a person of color. So especially in Canada, it is such a valuable, I come from an immigrant upbringing. I moved, my parents moved from the Philippines. My entire family moved from the Philippines to here when I was 10. So I had a lot of these perspectives that no one, to be honest, at the table had that I could bring to the table. So it wasn't until then when I realized that, oh, that was my superpower, was that the people sitting with me at the table didn't have the points of views that I had that was so necessary in driving the kind of business results and creativity that we needed to do. So I think that's why it's also so important that, you have different opinions at the table, right? So that you can have a more holistic approach at solving the problems we need to solve.
Did you know that I have a free team growth roadmap? Imagine if you didn't spend all day, every day in the weeds of running your business. That can mean more flexibility, more freedom, less overwhelm. I created the team growth roadmap to help my clients gain direction on the strategic systems and leadership actions for a streamlined business and a self-managing team to grow your business. Inside the roadmap, I share my compass method, an acronym for each step of the roadmap to get you out of the weeds of running your business and help you have a small but mighty team that gives you more freedom and flexibility. You can get all the details over at audreyjoykwan.com. That's AudreyJoykwan.com, or click the link in the show notes right there in your podcast app. Back to the show. So flash forward to today. How is 123 West cultivating a work environment and incorporating inclusion initiatives to support diversity?
Great question. And you know what? So it's two parts, right? I think in terms of what agencies and businesses need to do to become more diverse, inclusive, and as an agency. One is that there needs to be an appetite from the top down, but also across the entire agency to want to change. We can't function the same way that we have been working and hiring as we have as an industry. That's one. And then two, naturally, you need to have a group of people that are naturally open-minded to that, right? Like there's not a lot of friction. So what I love about 123 West was, and one of the reasons why I moved to 123 West was so we're about 40 people, and every single, I know I'm biased and I say this, I'm a partner in this agency, but one of the reasons why I moved to 123 West is everybody is just such there's all great human beings, meaning good people. We all share the same values when it comes to collaboration, our points of view on creativity, our points of view and wanting to make positive change and impact in the world and in our lives. It's so in sync, meaning everybody at 123 West feels like we have the same vision as people and who we are. That's one. And then I would say the second part at 123 West, why I moved there was they had this very resolute commitment to change. So obviously one of the things that our agency did was off the bat, we created a diversity and inclusion team. We answered POCAM's call for equity. We signed it. We are working hard at making sure we get everything on that list, but it's not just checking things off the list, but rather practicing as an agency diversity and inclusion throughout. So we created this group. So one of the things that we're doing, we're creating a scholarship that supports BIPOC people who are interested in the BIPOC community to go into the advertising field.
Can you share more about the BIPOC community? What is the BIPOC community? Because not everyone's going to understand what that means.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The BIPOC community is Black, Indigenous people of color. And essentially what we want to do is, Typically, our industry, as you know it, is not very diverse, not only in its makeup in the leadership role, but also the body of it.
Yeah.
And the entry level to advertising is expensive. So there's typically not a lot of opportunities for people who are in underprivileged backgrounds, who are typically people from, BIPOC communities, have the ability to enroll in programs and study advertising and design. So one of the big issues in our industry is addressing that pipeline. How do we build a pipeline where we can, one, attract students, high school students, elementary students to consider a career in advertising? So attracting is one part. One is retention. So how do we retain them through that entire process, from them going through school, through finding their internships, to landing a job in advertising and sticking to that? I think that whole journey, how do we ensure that we mentor and sponsor BIPOC creatives throughout that whole process? So one of the things that 123 West is committed to doing is help build that pipeline. So doing the scholarship. What we're also doing is we've actively relooked at our HR practices in terms of how we evaluate resumes, how we look for people and where we look for people in untraditional ways. So for example, we were looking for an account director maybe 6 months ago, 7 months ago. And we had great candidates off the bat already, like through word of mouth. But that's the thing with word of mouth. You hire people that look like you, that are in your circles, who are typically the same as you. So what we did was we actually spent the next 3 months, even though we had good candidates already, we spent the next 3 months doing the due diligence to actually look at, parallel industries that may have parallel skill sets. We looked at, people who recently moved from different countries to come work in advertising.
I want to highlight key thought here. You mentioned that when we look at only the circles that we're in, we're limiting ourselves to a closed circle. And in order to think about diversity and inclusion in a different way, we have to be able to see those habits, those things that we've been doing over and over again, things that we're not even aware of sometimes, so that we can do them differently.
For sure. And I think to your point too, what works so well at 123 West is not only as an agency we're committed to doing this, but we're holding each other actually accountable. So an instance just happened a couple of months ago is one of the creative directors. His name is Pierre. Hi, Pierre, if you're listening. And he said he looked at our freelance. So he's one of our CDs. And he looked at our freelance roster and realized, hey, our freelance roster, who you normally don't even sometimes think about from assessing from a diversity inclusion standpoint. It's like, I looked at our freelance roster. We're using the same types of thinkers, the same type of people. And I get it, right? Like when you're looking for freelance work, you want someone who is reliable and someone who's tried and tested. And typically your freelance roster, you work with people you like. And typically that list doesn't get challenged because it's working already. So he actually pushed us and was like, I know we have the people that we are using and we love them, completely fine, but there are opportunities to now add to this roster and have it so that we have top talent from all types of backgrounds. So he challenged our partnership group to say, we need to relook at our freelance roster. So he created this whole initiative to actually, reach out to specific organizations like the Collective Bunch, for example, to say, so for context, Collective Bunch is essentially their rosters are from BIPOC backgrounds. So he's pushed us to, relook at that roster and relook at it differently. And I think that's one of the things that I think is special. And what we need to do as agencies is, yes, we can have our checklist of things to do, but we also need to consistently keep each other in check. Like, are we actually living up to the things that we say we're living up to? And I got to give kudos to Pierre for bringing that up.
Yeah. I want to go backwards a bit and talk about the scholarship that you guys have. Can you tell us more about this scholarship?
So I can't say too much details yet because we're still ironing it out.
Got it. Okay.
But we will be releasing it. We're still in the process of organizing it. So that's one of the things that what we're doing. We're also working through our internship program. So typically 123 West do take in interns every year, but now we're giving it more structure. And we're also making sure that where we're looking will bring us the talent that we're looking for. So there's a lot of lenses in which I think we need to build our teams. And even now when we're hiring in Toronto we're hiring from anyone around the world, really, to be honest. But as we're growing as a team, the kind of conversations we're having wasn't typical to what we're having before, right? When we're looking at our creative team makeup, which partnerships works best, and are we over indexing on, the same kind of talent or not? So what I like about, I think, what we're doing and what other agencies are doing is they're actually looking at the makeup of the agency in totality to make sure that we are now inclusive in everything that we're doing.
So what are your thoughts on the difference between a band-aid solution versus an actual commitment to diversity and inclusion in an agency?
Well, so a band-aid solution is, and this is what I'm noticing too, I would say the beginning of for about a year last year, it was exciting to see all of the initiatives throughout an industry talking about having more diversity and inclusion programs, a lot of conversations around it. I will say this, I have noticed these conversations are, tapering back, not so much in the forefront anymore. What I love that, POCAM is what POCAM is actually doing is they've created, I don't know if I can say this, I think they've released it. They're creating a website in which they're holding all the, I think, 100 signatories of agencies accountable to their promise. So for me, a Band-Aid solution is performative, right? Saying we're going to do and create change, versus this needs to be a constant conversation. Like this whole thing isn't gonna stop, right? Like we need to actively be educating ourselves. So for example, making sure that you're reserving DEI budgets every year to spend in training your employees and changing your processes and how you work. It's constant change and evolution. And I think that's the difference. Band-Aid is a one-time thing versus the work that we need to do is, there's always work that needs to be done. It's never finished, really.
To be successful in diversity and inclusion, you've got to have unwavering support from top down. And there's got to be long-term commitment to activation, implementation, and training for organizational change. With that in mind, how are you setting people up in your organization for success?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think I said it earlier, where one is you need to establish an agency mindset in which there is always a willingness and openness to change, but also willingness and openness to understand and talk about things as an agency, right? Like, and I think 123 West, the scale helps. Like we're a 45 person agency. So we have an openness in how we communicate. We do quarterly surveys of our staff to see how they're doing, what's working, what's not working. We're quite transparent in how we communicate to our teams all of the initiatives that we're trying to do. So I think one is making sure that you create an environment that supports that openness for your teams to be able to be open to change, but also open to learning. And I think that's a big part of the success, is building that culture. And the second part is having a team, to my point earlier about holding each other accountable and being able to feel comfortable that you can hold each other accountable, regardless of where you are in the rung, right? Like regardless of title. And the thing is, I would say at 123 West, we feel like more of we are a flat structure. So the fact that challenging the partners on a point of view or challenging your colleagues on a point of view. We are very much an agency that fosters that openness of conversation. And I think that's a big thing for agencies or companies to do, is to create a culture in which people feel comfortable that they can effectively create change within it. Because a lot of the voices, so statistically, people of color, even I can speak personally too, as a woman and a person of color, I am more inclined to not be as vocal or it's how I've been functioned or raised, right? Like I've always been, as a Filipino woman, taught to obey your elders, do not speak up over your elders. So you need to consider that there's going to be voices at the table that will have opinions, and they feel like they need to be comfortable enough to have a platform to do that. So I think it's so important for companies to consider that they need to create that space and culture. And right now, I would say it's harder for people to speak up. And I think the success of an agency is through that.
I also deeply resonate with what you just said. Growing up in an Asian family, the general rule of thumb was don't speak until you're spoken to. I think how I approached being in the work environment in my early years was exactly that way. I was uncomfortable speaking up unless I was asked my opinion. The Asian cultural difference of what is expected of you when you are interacting with people who are older could have easily been misinterpreted in work environments for having nothing to say, which was not true for me. And as luck would have it, I had wonderful working environments and mentors along the way.
Yeah. And I think you made a great point. Like we need to create, what we need to do is create a culture of empathy, right? So if I think of design as a practice, design thinking is a form of empathy, meaning designers, what they inherently do is they try to understand their customer. They try to understand how that customer or consumer is going to experience their product or experience that website or experience that store, understanding their needs, where they come from. So I think as people, we need to do that as a blanket practice is, create that culture of empathy, of putting ourselves in each other's shoes, because, you don't know what kind of day somebody's having, how their home life is. So you really just need to put yourself in that position, not only internally as an agency, but also how we talk to our partners and how we collaborate with our partners and clients. It's so easy. And I've seen this in all the agencies that I worked at. There's that client agency relationship, right? Like there's a bit of that wall versus at the end of the day, we're all people. We all go home, we have kids, we have partners or no partners. We have these lives and we are people first. And I think that's one of the things that we need to consider when we're interacting as a group and as a business. It's, yes, we have shared business goals, but we also have, goals as humans that we need to understand our day-to-day lives to be able to collaborate better.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there is a separation between work and personal life?
So that's a great question. So I will say this, for 90% of my career, I've over-indexed on, my identity has always been my career. It has always been what I did. It's who I am. It's what defined me. And for a large chunk of my career, that's who I identified as. Who are you? Well, I'm Mo. I'm a designer. I work in advertising. And that was always who I was. And it wasn't until recently, until I realized that I needed to focus on all aspects of my life. So one of the exercises that I actually did between moving from John Street to 123 West was I created so I have a coach. So both at John Street and 123 West, we had an executive coach. One of the things that they emphasize is when you look at your career and your life, you should look at it holistically. What are your goals in business? What are your goals in your personal life? And what are your family goals? And it wasn't until the last 2 years I considered myself as a whole person. So when you asked about work-life balance, I definitely only had work balance, never life. And it wasn't until the last 2 years that I actually appreciated that I needed to think of myself, not having work-life balance, but creating a life in general that had all the things that I needed to support that life that I wanted to live. So I needed to be part of an agency and create a body of work that helps support the life that I wanted to live, while also, spending time with family and doing all of I create a lot of art on the side. So for me, it isn't really about a question about work-life balance, but more about life balance and focusing on what are the things in life that's going to make me happy.
And so what things in life right now do make you happy?
Great question. So when it comes to work, when I say work, when I created my 3 buckets, my goals for work was, and what fulfilled me was, I always need to be creating whatever role I was in, whether I was a partner or not a partner, I needed to be in something where I was always creating and producing something and being creative, either being a designer, creating furniture. So that's one of the things that make me happy. So check, I am doing that currently. The other things that make me feel like a whole person is that some of my goals is, mentorship, building community, being able to contribute back to community. So things that make me fulfilled are teaching and mentorship. So I was most recently mentoring with the Remix Project and Artworks TO. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but essentially the Remix Project focuses on youth specifically, and on youth that may not be able to, let's say, afford post-secondary studies in the creative field. Mm-hmm. So definitely doing more of that mentorship. I'm hoping to teach. I used to teach at Miami Ad School. I may be teaching at George Brown College next year if time permits, teaching design. So for me, what fulfills me is if I can have a part of my life that helps build community, whether building community through creativity, so teaching, mm-hmm. or design. Mental health is also a big aspect of which I wanted to be a part of. So mental health awareness. So I'm part of the SAD Collective, and my friend Megan is leading that initiative, and I support her in when I can. So as long as I'm building community, I'm also happy. And then the last thing that makes me fulfilled and happy is, making sure that the people close to me, the people who are near and dear to me, have a part of myself, to spend time with them, right? Mm-hmm. Like whether it's family, it's friends, my partner, I make sure that I still get time to spend with them. So I think that's when I think of when I want to balance my life. Am I fulfilled in all of those areas? And what I'm noticing is how I speak about my life no longer is just about like my career. I definitely have career goals. Mm-hmm. I'm very determined, and quite ambitious, but it's no longer what defines me. And I think I had to decouple myself from that.
Thank you for sharing that, Mo. Mo, where can people find you online?
Find me everywhere, essentially. So you can find me on Instagram at Mo, M-O, Bofill, B-O-F-I-L-L. That handle is the same for Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn, Mooren Bofill, M-O-O-R-E-N, Bofill, or at 123 West, Mo at 123west.ca. Shortest email ever.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Audrey. This is such a pleasure speaking with you, and this is such an important topic. So thank you very much for the chat and the insights.
Thanks, Mo. Thanks for listening to the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on iTunes. It would mean the world to me. Or send a screenshot on Instagram while tagging me at Audrey Joy Kwan.